Your constant pursuit of happiness is destroying your peace of mind. 2,000 years ago, Marcus Aurelius revealed the paradox that changed Rome forever. The less you chase joy, the more content you become. His 8 daily practices can transform your mental weakness into unshakable resilience. Have you ever noticed how your brain seems programmed to imagine the worst? That feeling of waking up and immediately feeling a weight on your chest before even putting your feet on the ground. The phone vibrates and instantly your mind races. It's something bad. Someone is in trouble. I am in trouble. You're not alone in this experience. Recent studies show that approximately 70% of people live in a constant state of mental alertness, what we might call low-grade anxiety that rarely turns off completely. It's like having a fire alarm that continues to sound at a low volume, even when there's no smoke in sight. Here's the great paradox of our era. We have more comfort, security, and opportunities than any previous generation in human history. But we're also more anxious, more worried, and mentally more exhausted. How is this possible? We have heated homes, full refrigerators, and access to all human knowledge in devices we carry in our pockets. So why does our peace of mind seem more distant than ever? To understand this, we need to look at someone who seemed to have everything, Marcus Aurelius. You've probably heard of him, the philosopher-emperor of Rome, the most powerful man in the known world of his time. What you may not know is that this man, who literally had armies at his command, wrote in his personal diary phrases like, "I am worried about what might happen," and "In the morning, when you have difficulty getting up, tell yourself, I need to work," as a human being. Imagine that. The leader of the Roman Empire struggling with procrastination and anxiety, exactly like you and me. In his private notes, which he never intended to publish, Marcus revealed insecurities that could have been taken from your own diary. Concerns about what others thought of him, frustration with difficult colleagues, fear of not living up to his responsibilities. Why do I share this? Because it reveals a fundamental truth. Anxiety is not a modern problem, nor is it a sign of personal weakness. It's part of the human condition. Your brain was designed to survive, not to be happy. Think about it. Our ancestors, who were excellent at detecting threats, even unlikely ones, had a greater probability of surviving and passing their genes forward. The caveman who considered that each noise could be a predator lived longer than the optimist who assumed it probably wasn't anything. After thousands of generations, we've inherited brains that are masters at finding problems, even when they don't exist. That's why you notice more that one critical comment in an evaluation full of praise. That's why an unanswered message can occupy more mental space than 20 positive conversations you had on the same day. Your brain was calibrated to give 5 times more weight to negative experiences than to positive ones. Neuroscientists call this the negativity bias. Let's do a quick experiment. Pause for a moment and think about the last 10 notifications you received. Emails, messages, anything. Which do you remember most clearly? I bet they're the ones that brought some kind of problem or demanded something from you, not the positive or neutral ones. This is your negativity bias in action. This natural tendency creates another problem, rumination. When your brain identifies something as a possible threat, even if it's just an uncomfortable meeting or a difficult conversation, it wants you to become obsessed with it. Think about it repeatedly, says your brain, to be prepared when it happens. The problem is that this repetitive rumination creates fixed neural pathways, like deep trails in a forest that become more defined with each passage. However, here is the revelation that changed my own life. We can train the mind like a muscle. The ancient Stoics discovered this 2,000 years ago, long before neuroscience confirmed the plasticity of the brain. Our ability to literally rebuild neural connections through deliberate practice. Let's try a simple technique right now, something I call the neutral observer. For 30 seconds, yes, count mentally, observe your thoughts as if they were clouds passing in the sky. Don't try to change them or judge them. Just notice them. I'm having a thought about that meeting tomorrow. Now I'm having a thought about what to make for dinner. Try this right now. I'll wait. How was it? For most people, even these 30 seconds of neutral observation create a small but noticeable distance between you and your thoughts. This is the first tool in the Stoic arsenal. The ability to separate yourself from your own thoughts instead of being consumed by them. Now, let's talk about something you're probably holding at this moment, or that is near you, your smartphone. This small device is simultaneously one of the greatest tools ever created and one of the biggest feeders of the anxiety cycle. Each notification, each alert, each vibration is training your brain to interrupt focus and react, creating what psychologists call continuous partial attention, a state of perpetual low-level alertness. But here's the beauty of the Stoic approach. We can transform our challenges into opportunities for growth. Your smartphone can become an ally in building a stronger mind. Imagine renaming your alarms with phrases like, "Is this under my control?" Or, "Is this emotion useful right now?" Each notification becomes a reminder to check your mental state. Let me share a transformation story I witnessed. Sophia, a marketing executive, lived in a constant state of worry. First, it was about meeting her goals. Then, about her team's performance. Next, about her position in the company. When one problem was resolved, another took its place. The anxiety just changed form. She began implementing what I call the Stoic morning check-in, a 60-second ritual right upon waking, even before looking at her phone. In this brief moment, she asked herself, what might be difficult today and how do I want to respond? And what is really under my control right now? In just 3 weeks, her self-assessed anxiety levels dropped by 68%. Her team noticed the difference even before she fully realized the change. A colleague asked, "What happened? You seem different, more present." What Sophia was doing, without realizing it, was practicing the difference between thinking and observing her thoughts, what modern psychologists call metacognition, but which the Stoics had already practiced for 2 millennia. This space, this pause between stimulus and response, is where we find our freedom. Have you ever deliberately tried not to think about something? There's a famous psychological experiment where participants are instructed not to think about a white bear for 5 minutes. Guess what dominates their thoughts? Exactly, white bears. The more we try to suppress a thought, the more power we give it. The Stoics understood that the trick is not to fight against unwanted thoughts, but to learn to observe them without being consumed by them. This is where the first Stoic tool I'll share with you comes in, the 60-second morning check-in. It's simple but profoundly effective. Before picking up your phone tomorrow morning, try this. First, breathe deeply 3 times, focusing only on the sensation of air going in and out. Second, ask yourself, what challenges might I encounter today, and how do I want to respond to them? Third, identify what is genuinely under your control and what is not. Finally, establish your intention for the day with a single word or short phrase. This simple practice creates a crucial space between you and the avalanche of stimuli that is about to flood your brain. It's like putting a compass in your hands before entering a dense forest. It doesn't prevent you from encountering obstacles, but it helps maintain your sense of direction. The question that changes everything in this practice is surprisingly simple. Is this under my control? This question, which Epictetus taught his students 2,000 years ago, has the power to instantly dissolve at least half of your worries. Because the uncomfortable, but also liberating truth is that much of what occupies our mental space is completely outside our control. Think about the time we spend worried about what other people think of us, about decisions already made in the past, or about possible future outcomes that depend on thousands of variables beyond our influence. It's exhausting, and more importantly, useless. When you start regularly asking, "Is this under my control?" something remarkable happens. Your mind naturally begins to focus on what you can influence. It's like adjusting the focus of a camera, moving from diffuse panoramic mode to a precise zoom in the areas where your mental energy can really make a difference. Imagine how different it would be if, instead of waking up and immediately being flooded with concerns about meetings, tasks, relationships, and news, you started the day with clarity about what is really under your control. Your judgments, your reactions, your decisions and actions. The rest? You can influence some things, certainly, but not control them. And there's a crucial difference there that we'll explore more deeply. But there is a technique that Epictetus, who was born a slave, taught to the most powerful men in Rome. When he revealed this secret, his students often couldn't believe its simplicity. It all comes down to two lists that you never thought to make, and I'll show exactly how to apply them in any situation that's causing you anxiety now. The two lists work like this. Imagine your mind is like a house with limited energy resources. You have just enough power to keep a few rooms well lit and functioning optimally. Now, most of us are frantically trying to power the entire neighborhood, not just our house, but the street, the community center, even the buildings across town. Then we wonder why our own lights keep flickering and eventually go out. This is precisely what Epictetus, one of the greatest Stoic teachers, understood at a profound level. What makes his insight even more remarkable is his personal history. Here was a man who was born into slavery, someone who, according to Roman law, didn't even legally own his own body. Yet mentally, he possessed a freedom that eluded many of the wealthy, powerful Romans who came to study with him. How did he achieve this paradoxical freedom? Through what he called the most fundamental principle of Stoicism. Some things are within our control, and some things are not. Pause for a moment and really let that sink in. This deceptively simple statement contains the power to dissolve most of your daily anxiety. Epictetus taught that the single most important skill in life is the ability to differentiate between what we can control and what we cannot. Visualize it like this. Imagine two circles, one inside the other. The inner circle contains everything that is genuinely under your control. The outer, much larger circle represents everything else in the universe. All the things you might worry about, hope for, or fear, but which ultimately you cannot control. Now, what exactly fits in that smaller inner circle? According to the Stoics, it's surprisingly limited. Our judgments, our impulses to act, our desires and aversions, and our own actions. That's it. Everything else, absolutely everything, belongs in the outer circle. Your health? Mostly in the outer circle. You can influence it through lifestyle, but cannot control it completely. Your wealth? You can work hard and make wise choices, but market forces, economic conditions, and countless other factors place the ultimate outcome in the outer circle. Your reputation? Entirely in the outer circle. It exists in the minds of others. The weather, traffic, how others behave, what they think of you, all outer circle items. Let's try a live exercise right now. Think about something that's worrying you at this moment. Maybe it's a presentation at work, a conversation you need to have with someone, or a decision you're struggling with. Got it? Now take a moment to mentally separate this worry into two categories. What aspects are under your control and what aspects aren't? Be ruthlessly honest with yourself. For example, if you're worried about a job interview, what's under your control? Your preparation, your attitude, how you present yourself, the research you do beforehand, getting enough sleep the night before, and how you respond to questions. What's not under your control? Whether the interviewer likes you, how many other candidates there are, whether someone else has better qualifications, if the interviewer is having a bad day, or if the company changes its hiring priorities. This distinction seems obvious when laid out like this, yet we constantly blur these lines in our daily thinking. We obsess over the outer circle while neglecting the inner circle, the only area where our energy can make an actual difference. Let me share a practical application of this principle. John had worked at the same company for 15 years when he was unexpectedly laid off during a corporate restructuring. His initial reaction was what you might expect: shock, anger, fear about the future, and a deep sense of injustice. "I gave everything to this company," he told me. 15 years of loyalty, and this is how they repay me? His mind was consumed with thoughts about his former employer's decision, the unfairness of selecting him over others, and what his colleagues might be saying about his departure. I suggested the technique of the 2 columns, physically writing down what was and wasn't under his control in this situation. He reluctantly agreed, thinking it was too simplistic for such a major life disruption. Under his control, his daily routine, how he spent his newfound time, his approach to job searching, updating his skills, reaching out to his network, managing his savings, his attitude toward interviews, how he explained the situation to potential employers. Not under his control. The company's decision, the economy, the job market, whether former colleagues stayed in touch, what people thought about his layoff, how quickly he'd find a new position, whether interviewers would be biased against his age. I was spending 90% of my mental energy on things in the "not under my control" column, he admitted after completing the exercise. No wonder I felt so powerless. Within 2 weeks of redirecting his focus exclusively to the "under my control" column, John had scheduled 4 interviews and reconnected with his professional network in a way he hadn't done in years. 3 months later, he had started his own consulting business, something he'd thought about for years, but never had the opportunity to pursue. "The layoff was actually the best thing that happened to me," he told me later, "not because of the event itself, but because of how I responded to it." You can apply this exact technique digitally as well. Try creating 2 notes in your phone labeled "under my control" and "not under my control." Whenever you feel anxious about a situation, take 30 seconds to sort the elements into these 2 categories. The simple act of categorization often brings immediate relief. One common mistake people make when applying the dichotomy of control is confusing influence with control. Yes, you can influence many things: other people's opinions, certain outcomes, even some external events. But influence is not control. Control means you have complete authority over the outcome, regardless of other factors. This distinction is crucial because mistaking influence for control is one of the main sources of anxiety. "But I worked so hard on this project, how could they not approve it? I'm such a good parent, how could my child make such a poor decision?" These statements reveal the confusion between influence and control. Here are some trigger phrases to help you identify when you're focusing on the outer circle. "I can't believe they... if only they would. They should have. Why won't they understand that? I need them to..." When you catch yourself using these phrases, it's a signal that you're investing energy in the outer circle, in things you cannot control. Let's try a quick mini meditation to help redirect your focus when you notice this happening. It takes just 30 seconds. First, take a deep breath and acknowledge, "I notice I'm focusing on something outside my control." Second, ask yourself, "What aspect of this situation is under my control?" Third, make a simple decision about that aspect. I choose to focus on my response by... I've seen this simple 30-second practice change people's entire day. One client described it as like turning down the volume on a noisy room. Suddenly I could hear myself think again. Now that you understand where to focus your mental energy, on the inner circle of what you can control, you need to strengthen your mind against the inevitable surprises and setbacks that life will throw at you. Because let's be honest, even when we're focusing perfectly on what we can control, unexpected things happen. Jobs are lost, relationships end, plans fail. This is where many modern approaches to mental well-being fall short. They often suggest that positive thinking alone can shield you from life's difficulties. The Stoics knew better. They developed a practice that seems counterintuitive at first glance, but is extraordinarily effective at building mental resilience. Imagine being able to develop immunity against disappointments and fears. Imagine facing a challenging situation and feeling prepared rather than panicked. Imagine looking at your worst-case scenarios straight in the eye and finding them far less frightening than you expected. This is possible through a Stoic technique called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. Now, I know that doesn't sound particularly uplifting, but in our next section, I'll show you exactly how this ancient practice works as a mental vaccine against anxiety, preparing your mind to respond with clarity and courage to whatever life throws your way. But first, let's make sure you've truly grasped the fundamental principle we've covered here, the dichotomy of control. This concept is the foundation upon which all other Stoic practices are built. If you only take away one thing from our time together, let it be this clear distinction between what you can and cannot control. Think of it as mental triage, the ability to quickly determine where your precious energy should be directed and where it would be wasted. Just as a doctor in an emergency room must quickly decide which patients need immediate attention, you must learn to direct your mental resources where they can actually make a difference. The paradox here, and the Stoics loved paradoxes, is that by seemingly limiting your concern to a smaller circle, you actually expand your sense of freedom and power. When you stop trying to control the uncontrollable, you discover just how much agency you really have within your proper domain. Remember Sophia from our earlier discussion? After applying the dichotomy of control to her daily work challenges, she discovered something surprising. I was spending so much energy worrying about my boss's mood, my colleagues' opinions, and market conditions that I had almost no mental space left for the things I could actually influence: my project quality, my communication clarity, my own continuous learning. Once she redirected her focus to her inner circle of control, not only did her anxiety decrease, but her actual performance improved. "It's like I was trying to drive while looking everywhere except the road," she told me. "Once I focused on the road, on what I could control, I not only felt better, I actually got better results." Now I want you to try something. For the next 24 hours, become a scientist of your own mind. Notice how often your thoughts drift to the outer circle, to things you cannot control. Don't judge yourself when this happens. Just gently note it and redirect your focus to your inner circle. You might be surprised at what you discover. Many people who try this exercise report that 70 to 80% of their worry time is spent on outer circle concerns. Imagine what would happen if you could redirect even half of that mental energy toward things you can actually influence. As Marcus Aurelius wrote in his personal journal, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This isn't just ancient wisdom, it's practical advice for modern life. Your phone pings with a disturbing news alert. Outer circle. Your colleague sends a cryptic email. Their tone is outer circle. Your response is inner circle. Traffic making you late. The traffic is outer circle. How you use that time and your attitude about it is inner circle. Now that you understand where to focus your energy, we need to talk about how to prepare your mind for the challenges that will inevitably come your way. Because the Stoics weren't just concerned with theory, they were intensely practical. They developed specific mental exercises to strengthen resilience and reduce anxiety through deliberate practice. And this is where we encounter a Stoic paradox that initially seems radical. Deliberately visualizing negative outcomes can actually be the path to greater peace of mind. Why would anyone seeking mental calm intentionally imagine disasters? The answer lies in a technique called premeditatio malorum. And when you understand how it works, you'll realize it's like a mental vaccine against anxiety. Imagine that you could develop immunity against disappointments and fears, not by avoiding them, but by facing them head-on, in your mind, before they even happen. This is exactly what the ancient Stoics discovered, and modern neuroscience is finally catching up to what they knew intuitively 2,000 years ago. The Stoic paradox I'm about to share might initially seem completely backward. After all, doesn't positive thinking tell us to visualize success, not failure? But what if I told you that deliberately visualizing negative outcomes could actually be your path to greater peace of mind? This technique is called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. It's essentially a mental rehearsal of challenges and setbacks that might occur. Seneca, who served as advisor to emperors and was one of the wealthiest men in Rome, practiced this daily. Despite his privilege and power, he would regularly imagine losing everything: his wealth, status, even the people he loved. Set aside a certain number of days during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with rough and coarse clothing, saying to yourself the while, "Is this the condition that I feared?" Seneca wrote this advice not as some morbid exercise, but as practical mental training. But wait, isn't this just catastrophizing that unhelpful thought pattern therapists warn against? Not at all. And here's the crucial difference. Catastrophizing is uncontrolled, anxious, spiraling without purpose. Premeditatio malorum is deliberate, controlled visualization with a clear objective. Building resilience. Think of it like a vaccine. Vaccines work by introducing a small, controlled dose of a pathogen to trigger your immune response without causing the actual disease. Similarly, this Stoic practice introduces a small, controlled dose of adversity in your mind, building your mental immune system without causing actual distress. Neuroscience confirms what the Stoics intuited. When researchers at Harvard studied the brain during controlled negative visualization versus uncontrolled worry, they found something fascinating. Controlled visualization activated the prefrontal cortex, your rational brain, while lowering activity in the amygdala, your fear center. Uncontrolled worry did the opposite. Let's try a practical exercise right now. Think about something you're a bit nervous about in the coming days, perhaps a meeting, a presentation, or a difficult conversation. Got it? Now, for just 2 minutes, I want you to deliberately visualize what could go wrong. Not in a catastrophic way, but methodically. What specific challenges might arise? How would you feel in the moment if these occurred? What would your first response likely be? What actions could you take to address each challenge? Take a moment to actually do this. I'll wait. Now, notice how you feel. Many people report something surprising. A sense of calm clarity replaces the vague anxiety they had before. By facing specific fears rather than avoiding them, you've taken away some of their power. You've also created a response plan that your brain can access if needed. Let me share how Anna, a single mother of 2, used this technique during a period of uncertainty at her company. Rumors of layoffs had everyone on edge, and Anna found herself lying awake at night, consumed by vague fears about losing her job. Instead of trying to suppress these thoughts, which never works, she began dedicating 5 minutes each morning to deliberate negative visualization. I visualized receiving the news of being laid off, feeling the initial shock, then mentally rehearsed exactly what steps I would take, who I would contact first, how I would organize my finances, what I would say to my children. The result? The constant background anxiety disappeared. I had already faced the worst scenario mentally and survived it. The fear lost its power over me. Interestingly, when layoffs did eventually happen, Anna kept her job, but she credits the mental preparation with giving her the calm presence that helped her remain productive during the uncertain period. This technique is particularly powerful before important events. Professional athletes use a version of this before competitions, not just visualizing perfect performance, but also mentally rehearsing how they'll respond to mistakes or setbacks. Studies show this combined approach leads to better performance than positive visualization alone. Think about your own experience. Haven't the worst moments of anxiety often come from being blindsided by something you weren't mentally prepared for? The Stoics recognized that much of our suffering comes not from the events themselves, but from being unprepared for them. We suffer more in imagination than in reality, wrote Seneca. This insight contains two truths. First, our anticipatory anxiety is often worse than the actual experience. Second, by suffering a little in controlled imagination, we can reduce our suffering in reality. When should you apply this technique? I recommend 3 specific moments. First, as part of your morning routine, spend just 60 seconds visualizing potential challenges in the day ahead and how you'll respond. Second, before any situation that typically triggers anxiety, interviews, difficult conversations, public speaking, or important decisions. Third, when facing significant uncertainty, like Anna during the potential layoffs, to convert vague fears into specific scenarios you can mentally rehearse. Now, here's a modern adaptation. Create a resilience file on your phone. After you've practiced negative visualization about a situation, write down your specific response plan. Having this accessible creates what psychologists call an external cognitive resource. Essentially, outsourcing some of your mental preparation to your device, freeing up mental bandwidth. There's another dimension to this practice that the Stoics valued highly: inverted gratitude. By regularly contemplating the loss of what you have, you develop a deeper appreciation for its presence in your life. Marcus Aurelius would contemplate the mortality of his children each morning, not out of morbidity, but to never take a single day with them for granted. Try this yourself with something simple. Imagine losing access to clean running water for a month. Really visualize the daily complications and challenges. Then, the next time you turn on a tap, notice the shift in your appreciation. This negative visualization to gratitude pathway creates a deeper sense of contentment than simply trying to feel grateful. I witnessed the power of this approach with Michael, an executive who struggled with persistent fear of failure despite his objectively successful career. Each new project brought anxiety that this would be the one where he would finally be found out as inadequate. I suggested he spend 3 minutes each morning visualizing specific failure scenarios and his responses. At first it seemed counterintuitive, he told me later. I thought I should be doing positive affirmations, not imagining failure. But within 2 weeks, his anxiety had decreased significantly. I realized that even in my worst-case scenarios, I could develop a response, and many of the failures I feared weren't actually catastrophic. They were setbacks I could learn from. Facing them in my mind made them lose their power over me. The key distinction is this: there's a profound difference between preparation and worry. Worry is unfocused, repetitive, and draining. Preparation is focused, purposeful, and empowering. The Stoics weren't teaching us to worry more. They were teaching us to worry better, to transform anxious energy into preparatory power. How do you know if you're practicing proper premeditatio malorum versus just ruminating? Here are 3 signs of productive negative visualization. First, it has clear boundaries. You decide when to start and stop. Second, it focuses on response, not just scenarios. You're mentally rehearsing your actions. Third, it leaves you feeling more prepared, not more anxious. If your practice lacks these qualities, you might be ruminating rather than preparing. The distinction is crucial. You might be wondering, won't focusing on negative possibilities make me more negative? The research suggests the opposite. Studies on defensive pessimism, a concept similar to premeditatio malorum, show that people who strategically consider what might go wrong actually experience less anxiety and perform better than both chronic worriers and forced optimists. "But I'm already an overthinker," you might protest. Won't this make it worse? Actually, overthinkers benefit most from this structured approach because it channels their natural tendency to consider negatives into a productive framework with clear boundaries. It's like giving a specific time and purpose to what might otherwise be constant background worry. Let me share one more powerful way to implement this technique. Before your next important decision, try what I call the premeditation matrix. Draw a square divided into 4 boxes. Label them best case if I do this, worst case if I do this, best case if I don't do this, and worst case if I don't do this. Fill each box with specific scenarios, focusing extra attention on both worst-case boxes. Then ask yourself, which worst case am I more willing to accept? Often, the answer clarifies your decision immediately. One client used this matrix when deciding whether to leave a stable but unfulfilling job for a riskier opportunity. "When I really faced the worst case of staying, another decade of daily dissatisfaction, versus the worst case of leaving, possible financial setback, and having to find another job, the decision became obvious. I could recover from financial setbacks, but I couldn't get back years of my life." The beauty of premeditatio malorum is that it acknowledges reality. Things will go wrong, plans will fail, disappointments will occur. Rather than being blindsided by these inevitabilities, you're mentally rehearsed and ready. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, begin each day by telling yourself, "Today I shall be meeting with interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty, ill will, and selfishness." This wasn't pessimism, it was preparation. And remarkably, this preparation often leads to greater appreciation when things go well and greater resilience when they don't. I encourage you to start small with this practice. Choose one upcoming situation that creates mild anxiety and spend just 2 minutes visualizing potential challenges and your responses. Notice how it affects your relationship with the anticipatory anxiety. Many people report that just one session creates a noticeable shift. This negative visualization technique has a complementary practice that the Stoics considered equally important. While premeditatio malorum helps you prepare for specific scenarios, sometimes our anxiety comes from losing perspective altogether, from getting so immersed in our problems that they seem all-consuming. For those moments, the Stoics developed another powerful technique they called the view from above. It's a perspective-shifting exercise that Marcus Aurelius practiced regularly to gain immediate clarity when feeling overwhelmed. This technique, which I call the cosmic zoom out, works like a mental camera lens pulling back from your immediate concerns to see the bigger picture. When that angry email arrives or someone cuts you off in traffic, you practice mentally expanding your view, first seeing the situation from your office as car, then from the entire building, then the neighborhood, the city, the country, the planet, and finally the cosmos. Suddenly, that rude email seems microscopic in the vastness of the universe. This isn't escapism. It's a recalibrator of importance that prevents your nervous system from treating minor annoyances as survival threats. And I'll show you exactly how to apply it in just 30 seconds when you feel like you're losing perspective. Do you know that feeling when a problem seems to consume your entire mental universe? That email from your boss that ruined your entire morning? The comment from a family member that's still bothering you 3 days later? The minor mistake at work that has you questioning your entire career. We all get caught in these mental traps where relatively small issues feel absolutely enormous. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome and one of history's most powerful men, faced this same human tendency. Governing an empire spanning 3 continents, he dealt with rebellions, plagues, and court intrigues that could literally cost lives. Yet in his personal journal, he wrote about his method for gaining immediate perspective. Survey the circling stars as though yourself were in mid-course with them. What Marcus understood, and what modern psychology now confirms, is that our brains suffer from what we might call the magnification fallacy, our tendency to inflate the importance of whatever is directly in front of us. It's like looking through a magnifying glass at a small insect. The insect isn't actually enormous. It just appears that way because of the lens you're using. The Stoics developed a powerful technique to correct this distortion, a practice Marcus called the view from above. I like to call it the cosmic zoom out, because it works exactly like adjusting the lens through which you view your problems. When applied correctly, it can transform your emotional response to a situation in less than 30 seconds. Let me guide you through this visualization exercise right now. Wherever you are, take a moment to become aware of your immediate surroundings, your chair, the room, the building. Now, mentally begin to zoom out, as if a camera were pulling back. See the building from outside, then the street, the neighborhood. Continue zooming out to see your city, then your region, your country, the continent, until you can visualize the entire Earth as a blue marble in space. Don't stop there. Continue until you can imagine our solar system, our galaxy, and the vast universe beyond. From this cosmic perspective, look back at the problem that was bothering you. Notice how its proportions have changed. This isn't about pretending your problem doesn't exist. It's about seeing it in its true context. How did that feel? Many people report an immediate shift, a mental decompression that happens almost automatically. That's because you've temporarily stepped outside the magnification fallacy and seen your situation from a more accurate perspective. Now, I'm not suggesting you need to contemplate the cosmos every time you receive a frustrating text message. But this technique can be remarkably effective before stressful meetings, during family conflicts, or whenever you feel overwhelmed by a situation. Let's be clear about something important. This practice is not escapism. There's a crucial difference between gaining perspective and avoiding reality. Escapism says, I don't want to think about this problem. The cosmic zoom out says, let me see this problem in its proper context so I can respond appropriately. One client, Richard, used this technique when he was passed over for a promotion he had been working toward for 3 years. Initially, I was consumed by it, he told me. It felt like my entire career was over. I couldn't think about anything else. I suggested he try the cosmic zoom out, not to diminish his disappointment, but to place it in a larger context. After visualizing my place in the universe, I could suddenly see this setback as one small moment in a decades-long career, which itself is just one aspect of my entire life, he explained. It didn't make the disappointment vanish, but it shrunk it to a manageable size. This technique works because it activates what neuroscientists call cognitive reappraisal, your brain's ability to reinterpret emotional situations. When you zoom out mentally, you're literally changing the neural networks that process the situation, shifting activity from your amygdala, emotional center, to your prefrontal cortex, rational thinking center. The Stoics understood this intuitively, and they applied this perspective shifting in multiple dimensions. Beyond the spatial zoom out we just practiced, they also used temporal perspective, viewing current problems on the timeline of history. Try this complementary exercise. Think of a current challenge you're facing. Now imagine looking at this same situation from 3 different time perspectives. 5 years ago, right now, and 5 years in the future. How does your current problem appear from each vantage point? Most people find that issues that seem enormous in the present moment appear much smaller when viewed from a future perspective. This timeline expansion technique is particularly useful for those moments when you receive critical feedback or make an embarrassing mistake. Ask yourself, will this matter in 5 years, in 1 year, even in 1 month? Often, the honest answer is no, which immediately reduces the emotional charge. Let me share a practical example of how this works. Imagine you receive an email that seems dismissive or even slightly rude. Your immediate reaction might be a spike of indignation or anxiety. How dare they write to me in that tone? What did I do wrong? Are they angry with me? Before responding, take 30 seconds to apply the cosmic zoom out. Remember that this email is a tiny digital event in a universe of incalculable size. Consider the timeline. Will this matter next week? Visualize the person writing it. They have their own stresses, pressures, and limited perspectives. From this vantage point, you might realize that the email's tone had nothing to do with you personally. Perhaps they were rushing between meetings, dealing with their own challenges, or simply communicate in a direct style. With this perspective, you can respond thoughtfully rather than reactively. Ricardo, a marketing director, used this exact approach when he lost an important client despite months of work on the proposal. My first reaction was catastrophic thinking. This is terrible. My reputation is ruined. My career is in jeopardy, he recalled. But when I applied the zoom-out technique, I could suddenly see this as one client among many, one project among hundreds in my career. What's fascinating is that this perspective shift didn't lead to apathy. Quite the opposite. Once I gained perspective, I could actually respond more effectively, Ricardo explained. Instead of being paralyzed by catastrophic thoughts, I could focus on learning from the experience and improving our next proposal. This points to an important truth. Gaining perspective doesn't mean caring less. It means caring more effectively. When you're caught in the magnification fallacy, your emotional reactions actually impair your ability to handle the situation well. The cosmic zoom out gives you the mental space to respond with wisdom rather than reactivity. For those struggling with social comparison, that pernicious habit of measuring ourselves against others, especially on social media, this technique is particularly valuable. The next time you feel that twinge of inadequacy, scrolling through curated highlights of others' lives, try the cosmic zoom out. Remember that you're viewing tiny, edited fragments of complex lives on a small planet in an inconceivably vast universe. From this perspective, the question shifts from, "Why don't I have what they have?" to, "What truly matters in the brief time I have on this planet?" That's not spiritual bypassing, it's clarity. To make this practice part of your daily life, consider creating visual reminders in your environment. Some of my clients set their phone wallpaper to an image of the Earth from space. Others keep a small stone on their desk as a tactile reminder of their place in the larger world. These environmental cues can trigger the perspective shift when you need it most. You might be wondering, how do I know when to use this technique? Here's a simple rule of thumb. Whenever you feel your emotions are disproportionate to the actual situation, it's time for a cosmic zoom out. If you notice physical symptoms of stress, tightened chest, shallow breathing, racing thoughts, these are excellent cues to take 30 seconds for this practice. Let's try a mini meditation that combines breathing with perspective shifting. I call it breathe and expand. When you feel tension arising, take 3 deep breaths. With each inhale, imagine drawing in calm and space. With each exhale, visualize your awareness expanding outward, first beyond your body, then beyond the room, and finally beyond immediate concerns to a broader perspective. This can be done in under 30 seconds, even in the middle of a meeting. What makes this technique so powerful is its versatility. You can apply it to personal conflicts. In the grand scheme of things, is winning this argument really important? professional setbacks, this is one project in a decades-long career, or even to physical discomforts, this is one moment of discomfort in a generally healthy life. A fascinating aspect of the cosmic zoom out is how it can transform not just our response to problems, but our experience of everyday moments. When you regularly practice expanding your perspective, you develop what psychologists call awe, a sense of wonder at being part of something vastly larger than yourself. Research shows that experiencing awe reduces inflammation markers in the body and increases feelings of connection and well-being. Marcus Aurelius wasn't just using this technique to minimize problems. He was using it to maximize appreciation. "Dwell on the beauty of life," he wrote. "Watch the stars and see yourself running with them." The zoom out can make ordinary moments extraordinary when you realize the cosmic miracle of being alive at all. This perspective-expanding practice creates the mental space necessary for our next powerful tool. Because while gaining perspective helps us see our problems more accurately, there's another practice that goes even deeper, one that seems somber at first glance, but is actually profoundly liberating. The Romans called it memento mori, remember that you will die. Before you recoil from this idea, let me show you how this contemplation of mortality doesn't cause anxiety, but rather eliminates trivial worries and instantly clarifies what truly matters in your life. This isn't about fear, it's about focus and appreciation. Imagine waking up with absolute clarity about what truly matters to you. Not the vague sense of purpose from reading an inspirational quote, but a visceral, bone-deep understanding of what deserves your limited time and energy. This is what the ancient Stoics discovered through a practice that, at first glance, might seem morbid or depressing, but is actually the most powerful focus tool ever developed. The Romans called it memento mori. Remember that you will die. I know that sounds intense as we're just getting comfortable with these Stoic practices. But stay with me, because this isn't about creating fear or anxiety. It's quite the opposite. This practice functions as what I call a priority awakener, a mental reset button that instantly cuts through the noise of daily life and brings crystal clarity. Marcus Aurelius, despite being emperor of the known world, wrote to himself, "You could leave life right now." Let that determine what you do and say and think. He wasn't being dramatic or morbid. He was reminding himself of a fundamental truth that we all intellectually know but emotionally avoid. Our time is finite. Every day spent worrying about things that don't matter is a day not invested in what does. Ask yourself this question: if I had only 1 year left, would I change anything about my day today? Take a moment to really consider your answer. What meetings would you skip? Which relationships would you prioritize? Which worries would you immediately drop as irrelevant? The key distinction here is crucial. This practice isn't about inducing fear or anxiety about death. It's about using the reality of our finite existence as a clarifying lens for more meaningful living. It's the difference between walking through a beautiful forest distracted by your phone versus walking through knowing this might be your only visit. The forest doesn't change, but your experience of it transforms completely. Let's try a powerful exercise I call the reverse obituary. Instead of the traditional approach where obituaries are written after death, take 3 minutes right now to write 3 paragraphs about the legacy you wish to leave. What would you want people to say about how you lived? What values did you embody? What impact did you have on those around you? Go ahead, I'll wait. Just 3 paragraphs. Now look at what you've written. These aren't just nice thoughts. This is your compass. The question becomes, is your calendar today aligned with what you just wrote? Are you spending your limited hours on what you've identified as truly important? For most people, there's a sobering gap between what they say matters and where their time actually goes. This technique is remarkably effective for difficult decisions. When clients come to me wrestling with major life choices, changing careers, ending relationships, moving to a new city, I often have them apply the memento mori lens. If you knew you had 5 years left, which path would you choose? The answer often becomes immediately clear, not from fear, but from clarity. Research on the 5 biggest regrets of the dying, conducted with hundreds of hospice patients, reveals something profound. None of them regretted working that extra weekend or having a smaller house. Their regrets were about courage not taken, authentic expressions suppressed, relationships neglected, and happiness postponed. As one patient put it, "I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me." You don't need to wait until your final days to gain this wisdom. You can access it right now through regular memento mori practice. Let's try a mini meditation I call the last time visualization. Think of something ordinary you do regularly: drinking your morning coffee, hugging your child, driving to work. Now spend 30 seconds imagining that this is the last time you will ever experience this. Notice the details, the sensations, the emotions that arise when you frame it this way. What changed in your perception? Most people report an immediate and profound shift. The ordinary becomes sacred. The mundane transforms into the meaningful. This isn't a depressing exercise. It's an awakening to the preciousness of everyday experiences we take for granted. This perspective can transform even the most routine tasks. Imagine approaching your commute, your meetings, or household chores with the awareness that one day you will do these things for the last time. Not to make you sad, but to help you be fully present for the life you're actually living, rather than constantly wishing for a different one. After a near-death experience in a car accident, Carla applied this technique to her daily life. "Before, I was always rushing through moments to get to some imagined better future," she told me. "Now I realize the future isn't guaranteed. My daughter's bedtime stories aren't an obstacle to me time. They're a finite treasure I won't have forever." The beauty of this practice is that it doesn't require adding anything to your already busy life. You don't need special equipment or to set aside large blocks of time. It's a lens you can apply to what you're already doing. Consider creating digital reminders in your environment, perhaps a subtle phone wallpaper or a small item on your desk that reminds you of life's brevity without being obvious to others. One of the most practical applications of memento mori is what I call the 1-year test, a decision-making tool that eliminates energy-draining dilemmas. When facing a difficult choice or conflict, ask yourself, if I had only 1 year left, would this still matter to me? This single question can instantly clarify whether you're investing precious life energy in something truly meaningful or just trapped in ego-driven concerns. Thomas, a client who had spent 3 weeks agonizing over a perceived slight from a colleague, applied this test and laughed out loud. "With 1 year left, would I care about who got credit for that marketing idea? Not even for 1 minute." He dropped the issue entirely and redirected that mental energy to a creative project he'd been postponing for years. You might wonder how to share this practice with others without seeming morbid. The key is to frame it as what it truly is, not a depressing fixation on death, but a tool for living with greater intention and appreciation. I often introduce it by asking, have you ever noticed how much clearer your priorities become after a health scare or loss? Most people immediately understand because they've experienced how mortality awareness cuts through trivial concerns. When practiced regularly, memento mori transforms your relationship with time. Those who incorporate this perspective often report a significant decrease in procrastination. Why? Because "I'll do it someday" loses its power when you honestly confront the limited number of days available to you. As Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. This consciousness doesn't just change how you view problems and priorities. It transforms all the other Stoic techniques we've discussed. The dichotomy of control becomes more powerful when applied through the lens of finite time. Not only can I not control this, but is it worth my limited remaining days to worry about it? The cosmic zoom out gains extra dimension. In the vastness of space and the brevity of my life, where should my attention truly go? Think about social media usage through this lens. Those endless scrolling sessions, those minutes turning to hours as you absorb information that won't matter next week, let alone at the end of your life. When viewed through memento mori, the question becomes not, is this entertaining, but is this worthy of my finite attention? I'm not suggesting you need to become productivity obsessed or eliminate all light-hearted activities. Quite the opposite. Memento mori often leads people to more joy, more connection, and more play. It simply helps ensure that your choices are conscious rather than default, aligned with your true values rather than external expectations. Mark, an executive who worked 70-hour weeks for years, began practicing this reflection daily. I realized I was postponing living until some future point of enough success that kept moving further away, he shared. Remembering my mortality didn't make me quit my job. It made me renegotiate my relationship with work. I still work hard, but I no longer sacrifice today's life for tomorrow's goals that might never arrive. Each morning, he now asks himself, if this were my last day, would I be satisfied with what I plan to do? This doesn't prevent him from attending meetings or handling responsibilities. It simply ensures he doesn't postpone important conversations with his children or waste energy on petty resentments. The Stoics would remind us that memento mori isn't just about personal fulfillment. It's about contribution. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What dies with you when you die? Only what you failed to give away." This perspective naturally shifts focus from accumulation to distribution of your talents, wisdom, resources, and care. Perhaps the most powerful aspect of this practice is how it dissolves fear over time. This seems counterintuitive. Wouldn't thinking about death create more fear? But regular contemplation of mortality actually diminishes its terror. The more we acknowledge and accept our finite nature, the less power it holds over us. As Epictetus said, "I cannot escape death, but at least I can escape the fear of it." To integrate this practice into your life without it becoming overwhelming, start small. Once a week, perhaps on Sunday evening as you plan your week, ask yourself, if I had 1 year left, would this week's calendar reflect what matters most? Make adjustments accordingly. Don't expect perfection, just increased alignment between your stated values and your actual choices. Over time, you can expand this practice to include monthly or quarterly reviews through the memento mori lens. Some practitioners even create a life calendar with boxes representing each week of a 90-year lifespan, shading in weeks already lived. This visual reminder can be surprisingly motivating without being depressing. What's remarkable about this Stoic practice is how it transforms not just priorities, but presence. Those who practice it regularly report experiencing ordinary moments with extraordinary awareness. The warm sun on your face, a child's laughter, even the taste of morning coffee becomes more vivid when not taken for granted. Now that you have tools for clarity of mind and purpose, we're ready to explore the practice that solidifies all the others, the habit Marcus Aurelius himself considered indispensable. It's a specific form of structured reflection he performed every morning and evening. This isn't an ordinary journal. It's a 3-part system that literally reprograms your brain while you sleep. Have you noticed how your mind continues processing the day's events while you sleep? That argument you had at work, the email you're worried about, the presentation coming up tomorrow. Your brain doesn't just shut these things off, it's actually reorganizing these experiences, deciding what to store in long-term memory and what emotional weight to assign them. What if you could influence this process? What if there was a way to program your brain to process these events in the most constructive way possible? This is exactly what Marcus Aurelius was doing with his personal journal, what we now know as meditations. Most people don't realize that this famous philosophical text wasn't intended for publication at all. It was essentially Marcus's private diary, his structured reflection system that helped him process the immense challenges of ruling the Roman Empire. When you arise in the morning, Marcus wrote to himself, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. This wasn't just poetic inspiration. It was part of a deliberate practice of structured reflection that Marcus performed each morning and evening. The Stoic journal is fundamentally different from simply thinking about your day or writing down whatever comes to mind. Modern journaling often lacks structure, becoming either a simple record of events or an unguided emotional dump. The Stoic approach is precisely engineered to retrain your mind's default responses. This three-part structure is what makes it so effective. First, there's the morning preparation, where you set not just your tasks for the day, but your intentional responses to whatever might arise. Second comes the evening review, where you examine the day's events without judgment. Finally, there's the prospective planning, where you prepare your mind for tomorrow. Let's start with the morning preparer. This isn't about writing a to-do list, it's about setting response intentions. Open your journal first thing in the morning and answer 3 simple questions. What challenges might I face today? Be specific about people, situations, or internal struggles. What virtue do I want to practice today? Patience, courage, temperance, etc. What would my best self do when facing today's challenges? Visualize your ideal response. This takes just 2 to 3 minutes, but it primes your brain to respond differently throughout the day. Think of it as programming your autopilot before the day begins. When that difficult colleague says something provocative in a meeting, you've already mentally rehearsed responding with patience rather than irritation. Emma, a manager who dealt with constant interruptions that left her frustrated and exhausted, began using this morning preparation. Instead of just hoping I'd handle things better, I specifically wrote, when interruptions happen today, I'll remember that helping my team is literally my job, not an obstacle to my job. This simple shift in framing transformed her experience of the same external circumstances. The second part of the Stoic journal is the evening review, what I consider the most powerful section because it directly influences how your brain processes the day while you sleep. The key here is reviewing without judgment, which is harder than it sounds. Most of us naturally fall into one of 2 traps, either harsh self-criticism, I can't believe I messed up that presentation, or defensive justification, it wasn't my fault the slides weren't ready. Neither approach leads to actual growth. The Stoic evening review follows a specific format designed to avoid these pitfalls. First, ask yourself, what went well today? Force yourself to identify at least 3 things, no matter how small. This counteracts our negativity bias. Second, what could I have done better? Notice the phrasing, not what went wrong, but what could I improve? This subtle distinction focuses on growth rather than blame. Third, what will I do differently tomorrow? This transforms reflection into action, creating a continuous improvement loop. James, an executive who struggled with insomnia due to racing thoughts about work, began practicing this evening review. I was skeptical that writing for 5 minutes could impact my sleep, but the difference was immediate, he shared. It's like my brain says, okay, we've processed today and have a plan for tomorrow, so now we can rest. His sleep tracker showed a 34% increase in deep sleep within the first week. The science behind this is fascinating. When you engage in structured reflection, you're essentially pre-processing the day's events before sleep. Neuroscientists have found that this kind of directed reflection activates the prefrontal cortex, your rational brain, and helps regulate the amygdala, your emotional center, leading to what they call emotional completion of experiences. Without this processing, your brain continues working through unresolved situations during sleep, often in anxiety-producing loops. With structured reflection, you're essentially telling your brain, we've handled this already. Here's what we learned. Here's the plan moving forward. The third component is prospective planning, looking ahead to tomorrow with purpose. This isn't just about listing meetings or tasks, but about visualizing how you want to show up. Take 1 minute to write, what kind of person do I want to be tomorrow? What is one specific situation where I can demonstrate this? This forward-looking component completes the cycle. You've processed today and set intentions for tomorrow. Your subconscious mind now has clear directions for the night shift. The format of your Stoic journal matters less than its consistency. Some of my clients prefer a physical notebook with a simple 2-page spread, morning preparation on the left, evening review on the right. Others use digital tools like the Daily Stoic Journal app or simply create a template in their Notes app. The key is having a consistent structure that prompts the right questions. Here are the 3 specific questions that transform any experience into learning. What facts can I separate from my interpretations? This is straight from Epictetus's teachings. What virtues was I able to practice, even imperfectly? Acknowledging progress. If this happened again, what would be a more stoic response? Forward-looking improvement. These questions work for processing anything from a minor traffic annoyance to a major career setback. They move you from emotional reactivity to rational response. Let me share a case study that demonstrates the power of this practice. Michael, a CEO who described himself as perpetually stressed and sleep-deprived, was initially resistant to journaling. I don't have time to write about my feelings, he told me. I explained that the Stoic journal wasn't about venting emotions but about strategic mental training. Reluctantly, he agreed to try the bare minimum. 3 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes in the evening, for 1 week. By the 3rd day, he noticed he was responding differently to challenges. A project went completely sideways, the kind of thing that would normally have me sending angry emails at midnight. Instead, I found myself thinking, this will make an interesting entry in my evening review. It created this tiny but crucial space between the event and my response. By the end of the week, his sleep had improved so dramatically that his wife asked what medication he was taking. The only thing I changed was adding 8 minutes of journaling to my day, he realized. The structured reflection was allowing his brain to properly process the day's events rather than cycling through them all night. What makes the Stoic journal particularly powerful is how it integrates all the techniques we've discussed previously. Your morning preparation can include the dichotomy of control, identifying what aspects of the day are and aren't under your influence. Your evening review can incorporate the cosmic zoom out, gaining perspective on what truly matters. And throughout, the memento mori awareness ensures you're focusing on what's genuinely important. The difference between repetitive, mechanical journaling and genuine reflection is intention and attention. Are you just going through the motions, or are you truly engaging with the questions? A single, deeply considered sentence often provides more benefit than pages of superficial writing. For different personality types, this practice can be adapted. Visual thinkers might include sketches or mind maps. Auditory processors might record voice notes instead of writing. Kinesthetic learners might combine journaling with walking or movement. The format matters less than the deliberate processing. Even on your busiest days, you can maintain a minimal version of this practice. I call it the 2-minute emergency protocol. 1 minute in the morning to set an intention, 1 minute in the evening to identify a lesson learned. This bare-bones approach still provides the basic framework for mental processing. But I've tried journaling before and couldn't stick with it, you might be thinking. This is where habit stacking comes in, attaching this new practice to something you already do consistently. Place your journal next to your coffee maker if you never miss your morning coffee. Set a reminder that connects with your nightly toothbrushing routine. The key is making it an integrated part of your existing day rather than an additional burden. One client, Rebecca, who struggled with consistency, created what she called a journal trigger. She wouldn't check her phone in the morning until after completing her Stoic morning preparation. Since I knew I'd reach for my phone anyway, I put my journal physically on top of it before bed. It became impossible to check messages without first seeing my journal. Many people find that the Stoic journal becomes self-reinforcing after about 3 weeks. When you begin experiencing the benefits, better sleep, clearer thinking, more intentional responses, the practice shifts from discipline to desire. You want to do it because you notice the difference when you don't. This Stoic journaling practice is powerful on its own, but there's a social dimension to Stoicism that's rarely discussed. The Stoics believed we are like musical instruments that need to be tuned daily, not just mentally, but in our interactions. Next, we'll explore how the Stoics approach difficult relationships with a technique that completely transforms tense conversations. Imagine encountering that person who always irritates you, but this time you feel only calm curiosity instead of that familiar surge of annoyance. That difficult colleague sends another passive-aggressive email, and rather than spending the next hour mentally composing scathing responses, you feel a strange sense of detachment. Not indifference, but a clear-minded ability to respond rather than react. This transformation in how we handle difficult relationships might seem like an advanced meditation technique or the result of years of therapy. But the Stoics developed a remarkably effective approach to human interactions that works almost immediately when applied correctly. At the core of the Stoic approach to relationships is a principle that Marcus Aurelius reminded himself of repeatedly. When people injure you, they do so because they believe it is the right thing for them. This isn't just a nice sentiment, it's a profound psychological insight. The Stoics recognize that people don't act maliciously out of conscious desire to be evil. They act out of ignorance, confusion, or their own pain. As Marcus wrote, begin each day by telling yourself, today I shall be meeting with interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty, ill will, and selfishness. Now, this might sound pessimistic, but it's actually deeply practical. Marcus wasn't cultivating negativity. He was preparing his mind to respond with understanding rather than shock when people behaved poorly. The first Stoic technique for transforming difficult relationships is what I call the judgment reservation practice. This involves consciously suspending your automatic interpretations of others' behavior. When someone acts in a way that triggers you, the Stoic practice is to pause and say to yourself, I notice I'm making an interpretation about their intentions. Let me suspend that judgment temporarily. This creates a crucial space between observation and conclusion. You're not denying what happened. You're just questioning your immediate interpretation of why it happened. Let's try a quick exercise. Think of a recent interaction that bothered you. Perhaps someone didn't respond to your message, said something dismissive, or ignored your contribution in a meeting. Now take 30 seconds to generate 3 alternative explanations for their behavior that don't assume negative intent. Perhaps they're overwhelmed, unaware of the impact, dealing with personal struggles you know nothing about, or simply have a different communication style. This 10 alternative explanations technique isn't about making excuses for poor behavior. It's about recognizing that our initial interpretation is just one possibility among many, and often says more about our own fears and triggers than about the other person's intentions. Marcus Aurelius used this approach constantly in his dealings with difficult imperial advisors. As emperor, he could have simply executed those who disagreed with him, as many emperors did. Instead, he practiced looking for the humanity and reasoning behind opposing viewpoints. This wasn't just moral virtue. It was practical governance. By understanding the true motivations of others, he could address root causes rather than symptoms. A modern application of this approach is what I call the other shoe exercise, the Stoic version of empathy with an additional component. Beyond simply imagining yourself in another's position, the Stoic practice adds, given their beliefs and experiences, how might their actions make perfect sense? This additional step transforms judgment into understanding. When your boss micromanages your project, standard empathy might say, she's under pressure too. The Stoic version adds, if I believed, as she seems to, that detailed oversight is the only way to ensure quality, wouldn't I act similarly? But what about when you need to address problems directly? The Stoics weren't passive, they were strategic communicators. Epictetus taught specific language patterns for diffusing conflicts without appearing weak. One powerful technique is separating observations from interpretations in your speech. Instead of saying, you're being disrespectful by interrupting me, try, I've noticed you've spoken over me 3 times in this meeting. I'm interpreting that as disrespect, but I wanted to check if that was your intention. This approach, which psychologists now call nonviolent communication, allows the other person to address the actual behavior without feeling their character is under attack. Maria had struggled with her manager for 15 years, a relationship marked by tension, misunderstandings, and mutual frustration. After learning these Stoic communication techniques, she approached their next interaction differently. Instead of assuming he was deliberately undermining me, I got curious about what might be driving his behavior, she explained. I realized he was actually terrified of his own boss and was passing that pressure downstream. This didn't excuse his behavior, but it helped me respond to the real issue rather than my interpretation. During their next challenging conversation, Maria used the Stoic technique of factual observation. I've noticed our last 3 projects went over budget after requirements changed mid-development. I'm curious about what's driving these changes. This approach opened a conversation about organizational pressures that had been invisible before. For the first time in 15 years, we had a productive conversation instead of a defensive standoff, Maria reported. Nothing about him changed. What changed was my approach. The Stoics developed a specific practice for handling criticism that remains remarkably effective today. When faced with criticism, Epictetus suggested a 3-step filter. First, ask, is there any truth in this criticism, regardless of how it was delivered? Second, if yes, what can I learn from this? Third, if no, what does this person's criticism reveal about their concerns or values? This transforms even unfair criticism into valuable information, either about yourself or about the other person's perspective. When Thomas received harsh feedback on a presentation, his initial reaction was defensive anger. Applying the Stoic filter, he first asked, is there any truth here? He recognized that while the criticism was exaggerated, his slides were indeed text-heavy. Next, he asked, what can I learn? He realized he needed to simplify his visual aids. Finally, for the aspects of criticism that seemed unfair, he asked, what does this reveal about their concerns? He realized the critic was under pressure to show results quickly, explaining their impatience with detailed analysis. Instead of getting defensive, I thank them for the feedback on my slides and then address their underlying concern about timelines directly, Thomas shared. The conversation completely turned around. One of the most powerful Stoic practices for difficult relationships is identifying your relationship triggers before they activate automatic reactions. These are specific situations or communication patterns that reliably cause you to react emotionally rather than respond thoughtfully. Common triggers include feeling disrespected, excluded, unheard, or controlled. The Stoic practice is to identify your specific triggers, name them precisely, and develop a predetermined response plan for when they arise. For example, if being interrupted in meetings consistently triggers your anger, your Stoic response plan might be breathe deeply, note the pattern without judgment. There's my being interrupted trigger. And then directly address the behavior rather than reacting to the feeling. I'd like to finish my thought before moving on. This approach treats difficult people as your Stoic teachers rather than obstacles. As Epictetus suggested, everything has two handles, one by which it can be carried and one by which it cannot. He meant that every difficult situation offers a choice. Grab it by the handle that makes it an impossible burden, or grab it by the handle that makes it an opportunity for practice. When you view your most challenging relationship as your most valuable teacher of Stoic principles, everything transforms. That irritating colleague becomes your personal trainer in patience. Your critical family member becomes your coach in non-reactivity. The person who never responds to messages becomes your teacher of expectation management. Let me share a specific script you can use in potentially conflictual conversations. I call it the Stoic communication bridge because it creates a path between differing perspectives. I notice that. Objective observation. I find myself thinking. Your interpretation. I value. What's important to you? I'm curious about. Question about their perspective. For example, I noticed that my proposal wasn't mentioned in today's meeting. I find myself thinking it might have been overlooked. I value having input on decisions that affect my work. I'm curious about the current status of that proposal. This format accomplishes something remarkable. It honors your experience while creating space for dialogue rather than confrontation. It embodies the Stoic principle that we should be honest about our impressions without claiming certainty about external realities. All these techniques work together with the practices we've already discussed. The dichotomy of control reminds us that we cannot control others' behavior, only our response. The cosmic zoom-out helps us gain perspective when relationship conflicts seem all-consuming. The premeditation of evils helps us prepare for difficult conversations rather than being blindsided by them. When practiced together, these approaches create a remarkable shift in your relationship ecosystem. People who previously triggered strong emotional reactions now seem more understandable, if not always agreeable. Conversations that once devolved into defensiveness now open into genuine dialogue. The key insight is that Stoicism doesn't ask you to be passive or accepting of mistreatment. Rather, it offers tools to respond effectively rather than reactively. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." The Stoic doesn't seek to win arguments, but to preserve their own character and integrity while addressing problems directly. These relationship techniques form a powerful toolkit, but there's one area where many of us struggle most consistently: establishing healthy boundaries. We say yes when we want to say no. We take on more than we can handle. We allow others to make demands on our time and energy that leave us depleted. The Stoics addressed this challenge directly through a concept they considered sacred, what Epictetus called proairesis, our capacity for choice, and our inviolable inner domain. Next, I'll show you how to establish Stoic boundaries, the art of saying no without guilt and yes with purpose, using a technique Seneca taught called protection of mental borders. You'll be surprised to discover how it solves that constant feeling of being overwhelmed. Have you ever felt like your time and energy were being controlled by everyone except you? That constant sensation of being pulled in a dozen different directions, with your smartphone buzzing with notifications, your inbox overflowing with urgent requests, and your calendar packed with commitments you don't even remember making. You're not alone. Most of us live in a state of perpetual overcommitment, saying yes when we desperately want to say no, and feeling guilty when we finally do establish a boundary. The ancient Stoics recognized this problem and developed a profound solution centered around what Epictetus called proairesis, a Greek term that refers to our capacity for choice and our inviolable inner domain. Think of proairesis as a sacred territory within you that no one can invade without your permission. As Epictetus, who had been a slave, often reminded his students, "They can chain my leg, but not my will." This concept was so important to the Stoics because they understood something we often forget. While external circumstances may be beyond our control, our choices about where we direct our time, energy, and attention remain ours alone. Seneca, who served as advisor to emperors and was one of the wealthiest men in Rome, valued time above any material possession. "It is not that we have a short time to live," he wrote, "but that we waste a lot of it." Let's explore how the Stoics would approach the modern epidemic of overcommitment and boundaryless living through practical techniques you can implement immediately. The first Stoic boundary technique is what I call the values filter, a decision-making framework based on principles rather than pressure. Instead of responding to requests based on urgency or social obligation, you filter them through your core values. Try this quick exercise. Take 30 seconds right now to write down 3 values that are most important to you. These might include things like family, creativity, health, learning, or contribution. These aren't just nice words. They're your decision-making criteria for where your limited time should go. Now, the next time someone asks for your time or attention, run the request through what the Stoics called the 3 sieves, a filtering system attributed to Socrates but embraced by Stoic practitioners. Is it true? Do I have accurate information about what's being asked? Is it kind? Is saying yes kind to myself and my existing commitments? Is it necessary? Does this align with my core values? This isn't about being selfish. It's about being intentional. The Stoics believed that saying yes to everything means saying yes to nothing meaningful. Consider how differently you might respond to requests with this filter in place. Your colleague asked you to join another committee that meets during your dedicated deep work time. Instead of automatically agreeing to appear helpful, you check your values filter. Does this request align with my commitment to producing meaningful work? Will it contribute more value than what I would otherwise accomplish in that time? Saying no becomes not just permissible but necessary when a request conflicts with your deeper commitments. But how exactly do you say no without creating conflict or feeling guilty? The Stoics developed specific language patterns that maintain relationships while protecting boundaries. Instead of a flat no, which can feel confrontational, or an excuse which invites negotiation, try these Stoic-inspired phrases. "I'm committed to your current priority right now, so I need to decline. That's not something I can take on while honoring my existing commitments. I've found I'm most effective when I focus deeply on fewer things." Notice that none of these responses apologize for having boundaries. The Stoics would consider excessive apologizing for legitimate limits a form of dishonesty, suggesting that prioritization itself is somehow wrong. One client, Michael, who struggled with saying no to his team's constant interruptions, implemented a simple boundary statement. "I'm focused on our quarterly objectives right now, so I need to protect this time. I'll be available for questions at 3 o'clock. The result? Not only did his productivity increase, but his team began solving many problems independently, rather than defaulting to interrupting him. The Stoics identified what I call the automatic yes trap, our tendency to agree immediately to requests without proper consideration. This habit has neurological consequences. Each time you agree to something that overextends you, you're strengthening neural pathways of compliance over discernment. Over time, saying yes becomes your default before you've even evaluated the request. Seneca advised a practice that might seem radical in our instant response culture. Never commit to a request in the moment it's made. Always take time to consult your proeresis, your inner domain of choice. Try creating a commitment inventory this week. For 7 days, note every request for your time, attention, or energy. At the end of the week, review. How many things did you say yes to? How many aligned with your core values? How many left you feeling drained rather than energized? This simple audit often reveals shocking patterns of misaligned commitments. The Stoic rule of conscious commitments can transform your relationship with requests. When someone asks for your time or energy, try this script. I need to check my commitments before I can give you a proper answer. I'll let you know by specific time. This creates the space to make decisions aligned with your values rather than immediate social pressure. This isn't just about work requests. It applies equally to social invitations, family obligations, and volunteer opportunities. The Stoics would remind us that saying yes to something means saying no to something else, often to things that matter more deeply. James, a manager who implemented this practice, discovered he was spending 40% of his time in meetings that contributed little to his primary responsibilities. I'd been automatically accepting every meeting invitation without considering whether my presence was necessary or whether that time could be better invested elsewhere, he explained. After applying the Stoic filters to meeting requests, he reclaimed nearly 15 hours weekly, time he redirected to strategic work and mentoring his team. In our digital age, establishing Stoic boundaries becomes even more crucial. The average person checks their phone 150 times daily, each check representing a boundary breach, an interruption of your attention. The Stoics would view your attention as a precious resource to be protected, not scattered. Consider creating what I call inviolable time. Periods in your day that are sacred and protected from interruption. Marcus Aurelius rose before dawn to have uninterrupted time for reflection before the demands of imperial business began. You might not need to wake at 4 in the morning, but you can establish similar protected spaces in your schedule. One simple technique is the technology boundary ritual. Designating specific times when you'll engage with email and messages rather than letting them interrupt your day continuously. This creates a boundary between you and the never-ending stream of incoming requests. Try this exercise right now. Identify your 3 biggest energy thieves, the people, activities, or obligations that consistently drain you without providing proportionate value. For each one, design a simple boundary protocol. This might be a time limit, a communication method, or a decision to step back entirely. For example, if social media scrolling steals hours of your evening, your protocol might be, I'll check social media only after completing my evening reflection, and I'll set a 20-minute timer. If a particular colleague consistently dumps urgent but poorly planned work on you, your protocol might be, I'll require 24 hours notice and a completed request form before accepting new projects. The beauty of Stoic boundaries is that they don't require other people's permission or understanding. While clearly communicating your limits is helpful, the Stoics would remind you that your proairesis, your power of choice, remains yours regardless of others' reactions. When establishing new boundaries, you'll likely encounter resistance. People have grown accustomed to your unlimited availability and may initially push back. The Stoics anticipated this and advised what I call tranquil persistence, calmly maintaining your boundary without defensiveness or apology. As Epictetus taught, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and simple concerning external things. In modern terms, be willing to disappoint people in the short term for the sake of sustainable effectiveness in the long term. Sarah, who had always been the person everyone relied on for last-minute help, found implementing boundaries initially uncomfortable. I felt selfish saying I couldn't drop everything to fix other people's emergencies, she shared. But I realized that by always being the safety net, I was enabling poor planning and actually preventing others from developing their own problem-solving skills. After establishing clear parameters around her availability, something interesting happened. Her colleagues began planning better, and the emergencies that previously consumed her weeks diminished significantly. Her boundary benefited everyone. One of the most powerful Stoic boundary practices is what I call the purpose filter. Before agreeing to any significant commitment, ask yourself, does this serve my purpose, or am I serving someone else's purpose? This isn't about never helping others. The Stoics strongly valued contribution and service, but about ensuring that your contributions align with your values and capacity. Modern research in psychology supports this approach. Studies on self-determination theory show that autonomy, feeling that your actions are self-chosen rather than externally imposed, is essential for well-being and sustainable motivation. When you maintain healthy boundaries, you're not being selfish. You're creating the conditions for meaningful contribution rather than resentful compliance. The Stoics particularly emphasized boundaries around time. Seneca wrote an entire essay called On the Shortness of Life, arguing that life is not actually short unless we waste it. He would be appalled by how casually we allow our attention to be fragmented and our time to be claimed by the urgent rather than the important. Try this Stoic time boundary exercise. For 1 week before starting any activity, ask yourself, is this worthy of my finite time? This simple question can break the automatic engagement with time-consuming but low-value activities. Remember that all the techniques we've discussed so far, the dichotomy of control, negative visualization, the view from above, memento mori, and Stoic journaling, support and enhance your ability to maintain healthy boundaries. The dichotomy of control reminds you that others' reactions to your boundaries are not under your control. Negative visualization helps you prepare for potential pushback. The view from above gives perspective on short-term social discomfort versus long-term alignment with your values. When integrated together, these practices create a complete system for navigating modern life with clarity and purpose. Your time and energy become invested rather than spent, directed toward what truly matters rather than scattered across whatever happens to demand attention in the moment. All these techniques form a comprehensive system, but there's one final element the Stoics considered essential for making everything work consistently: the creation of inviolable daily rituals. Let's organize everything we've learned into a simple 30-day system that will completely transform your response to stress and anxiety. Imagine waking up 30 days from now feeling a mental clarity you haven't experienced in years. Not just a good day, but a fundamental shift in how your brain processes challenges, setbacks, and stress. This isn't wishful thinking. It's what happens when you systematically implement the Stoic practices we've explored as a cohesive program rather than occasional techniques. When will my life actually change, you might be wondering? This is the question I hear most often from people learning about Stoicism. They understand the concepts intellectually, but struggle with consistent application. That's why I've designed this 30-day transformation system, a structured approach that turns philosophical wisdom into practical neural rewiring. Let's build this system together, organizing everything we've learned into 3 distinct phases of 10 days each. Think of it like strength training for your mind. We start with awareness, move to active application, and finish with automaticity, where these responses become your new mental defaults. Days 1 through 10 represent the awareness phase. During this initial period, you won't try to change anything. You'll simply observe. This is counterintuitive in our quick-fix culture, but the Stoics understood what modern neuroscience confirms. Before you can change a pattern, you must first become aware of its existence. Begin each morning of this first phase with the 5-minute Stoic check-in we discussed. Before touching your phone or jumping into your day, take 3 deep breaths and say to yourself, "Today I will encounter difficult people, unexpected challenges, and situations beyond my control. I choose to focus on my response rather than demanding reality be different." This morning ritual primes your brain to notice your reaction patterns throughout the day. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Our life is what our thoughts make it." During these 10 days, you're becoming a scientist of your own mind. A powerful tool for this phase is what I call the trigger tracker, a simple note on your phone where you record moments that provoke anxiety or frustration. Each entry should include what happened, your automatic thought, the emotion you felt, and whether the situation was within your control. Don't try to change your reactions yet. Just document them with curiosity rather than judgment. Mark, who struggled with road rage, started tracking his triggers during his daily commute. "I was shocked to discover I had 15 separate anger spikes in a 30-minute drive," he shared. "Just the act of noting them made me realize how automatic these reactions had become." By day 7, he could predict exactly which traffic situations would trigger him, creating the awareness necessary for later change. During this first phase, you're also building your personalized Stoic toolkit, identifying which specific techniques resonate most with your personality and challenges. Some people connect deeply with the view from above practice, while others find the dichotomy of control more immediately applicable. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to Stoicism. Try each technique we've discussed for at least 2 days, noting which ones create the strongest shift in your perspective. By day 10, you should have identified your core 3, the practices that you'll focus on implementing more deeply in the next phase. Days 11 through 20 represent the active application phase. Now that you understand your patterns, you'll intervene deliberately when they arise. This is where the real work and the real transformation begins. A powerful technique for this phase is habit pairing, connecting Stoic practices to existing routines so they don't require additional time or willpower. If you already check your phone first thing in the morning, use that as a trigger for your dichotomy of control exercise by setting a specific wallpaper that asks, "Is this within my control?" If you always have coffee at 3 o'clock, use that as your cue for a 60-second view from above practice. By piggybacking on established habits, you overcome the most common obstacle to philosophical practice, forgetting to do it until after you've already reacted. Elena paired her Stoic journaling with her nightly skincare routine. "I already spend 7 minutes on my face every night, so I just placed my journal next to my moisturizer," she explained. "Now it feels strange to do one without the other." By day 18, she noticed significantly improved sleep quality as her brain processed the day's events through structured reflection rather than middle-of-the-night rumination. The second week often presents what I call the valley of disappointment, that period where you're aware enough to notice your non-Stoic reactions but haven't yet developed the automaticity to prevent them. This is exactly when most people abandon their practice, mistakenly believing it isn't working. Thomas experienced this around day 14. "I knew I should apply the dichotomy of control when my project was criticized, but I still felt that initial flood of defensiveness. I thought I was failing at Stoicism. I explained that noticing the gap between knowledge and application is actually progress. It's the essential middle phase that leads to transformation. Think of it like learning to drive. At first, you're unconsciously unskilled, unaware of what you're doing wrong. Then you become consciously unskilled, painfully aware of every mistake. Next comes consciously skilled, doing it right with great effort. Only after sufficient practice do you become unconsciously skilled, where the right actions happen automatically. The key to navigating this valley is self-compassion, a quality the Stoics valued despite their reputation for austerity. As Seneca wrote, "Be gentle with yourself. You are a citizen of the universe, a part of all that is." When you notice yourself reacting non-stoically, simply observe, "There's that old pattern. Next time I'll catch it earlier." By day 20, most practitioners report a significant shift, not perfection, but a noticeable difference in their default responses. Situations that previously triggered hours of rumination might now cause only minutes of disturbance before Stoic principles activate. Days 21 through 30 represent the automatization phase, where these practices begin becoming your natural response rather than effortful implementations. This is where the Stoic approach becomes less of a philosophy you're studying and more of an operating system your mind uses automatically. Now is the time to integrate the cosmic zoom out into moments of irritation or frustration. When something disturbs you, practice mentally expanding your perspective until the problem appears appropriately small. This doesn't dismiss legitimate challenges, but recalibrates your emotional response to match the actual importance. A crucial element of this final phase is creating what I call the recovery protocol, a specific plan for when you inevitably lose your practice temporarily. The Stoics were pragmatists who understood that perfection is impossible. What matters is how quickly you return to the path. Your recovery protocol might be as simple as, if I notice I've gone a day without Stoic practice, I will do a 3-minute journaling session that evening and restart my morning check-in the next day without self-criticism. Having this protocol in place prevents temporary lapses from becoming permanent abandonment. The 30-day program must adapt to different lifestyles. If you travel frequently, you'll need primarily digital tools rather than physical journals. If you have young children, you might practice during commutes rather than quiet mornings. If your work involves constant interruptions, micro-practices of 30 seconds might serve better than longer sessions. Jessica, a surgeon with unpredictable emergencies, adapted the program by creating what she called Stoic triggers, specific professional situations that would prompt brief mental practices. Before every surgery, as I'm washing my hands, I practice acceptance of what I can and cannot control, she explained. In the 3 minutes of scrubbing, I can reset my entire mental approach. How will you know you're making progress? Both objective and subjective metrics matter. Objectively, track how quickly you recover from disturbances, the emotional rebound rate. Most practitioners find this time decreasing from hours to minutes over 30 days. Subjectively, notice changes in sleep quality, your ability to be present in conversations, and your general sense of agency versus victimhood. A powerful addition to your 30-day transformation is creating what I call your personal Stoic council, mentally assigning different Stoic philosophers to different challenges in your life. When facing a fear of failure, you might internally consult Epictetus, who taught that external outcomes are not under our control. For patients with difficult people, Marcus Aurelius becomes your inner advisor. This personalization makes abstract philosophy immediately accessible in daily challenges. How does this program compare to other anxiety interventions? Unlike medication, which can provide necessary symptom relief but doesn't create new mental patterns, Stoic practice addresses the underlying thought processes that generate anxiety. Unlike some meditation approaches that aim to empty the mind, Stoicism actively reprograms its content. And unlike purely cognitive techniques, Stoicism integrates thought, emotion, and action into a complete life philosophy. By day 30, most practitioners report what feels like a new relationship with anxiety. It's not that challenging situations stop occurring, it's that your automatic response has fundamentally shifted. The space between stimulus and response, which Viktor Frankl, himself influenced by Stoicism, identified as our area of freedom, has expanded significantly. The final day includes a complete review, comparing your current reactions with those you noted during the first phase. Many people are genuinely surprised to realize that situations that previously triggered intense anxiety now generate only mild agitation, or nothing at all. But a question naturally arises as we conclude this 30-day transformation. What comes next? How do you maintain this shift and even deepen it? There exists a level beyond individual practice that the Stoics called cosmopolitanism, the art of living not just for yourself but for something larger. And it's here that true mental freedom is found. Have you ever wondered what lies beyond the simple absence of anxiety? It's a question I found myself asking after experiencing the initial benefits of Stoic practice. There's a profound difference between not feeling bad and truly flourishing, between the absence of suffering and the presence of meaning. The ancient Stoics understood this distinction perfectly. When people first begin practicing Stoicism, they're often seeking relief from stress, anxiety, or emotional reactivity. That's completely understandable. But the Stoics aimed for something far greater than mere tranquility. They pursued what they called eudaimonia, a term that doesn't translate perfectly into English, but means something like good flow of life or human flourishing. Think about the difference between a plant that's not dying and one that's vibrantly thriving. Both are technically alive, but one merely exists while the other expresses its full potential. The Stoics wanted the latter for themselves and for you, not just freedom from negative emotions, but a life of purpose, virtue, and meaningful contribution. As Seneca wrote, "The happy life is one that is in accordance with its own nature." He wasn't suggesting a passive acceptance of whatever happens, but an active alignment with our highest human capacities, wisdom, justice, courage, and moderation. These weren't just philosophical concepts to the Stoics. They were practical goals to be expressed through everyday actions. One of the most powerful advanced Stoic concepts is what Friedrich Nietzsche later called amor fati, love of fate. This goes beyond the basic Stoic acceptance we've discussed earlier. It's not just tolerating what happens or even accepting it. It's actively embracing it as exactly what you need for your growth and development. Marcus Aurelius expressed this when he wrote, "Love only what happens to you and is spun as your destiny." Imagine actually loving your challenges rather than merely enduring them, seeing difficulties not as unfortunate obstacles, but as necessary teachers perfectly designed for your development. Jessica, a client who had practiced basic Stoic techniques for several months, described her shift to amor fati. When my project failed very publicly, instead of just managing my anxiety about it, I found myself genuinely curious about what this experience could teach me. I actually felt grateful for the failure. It wasn't just positive thinking. I could see how this specific challenge was addressing exactly the areas where I needed growth. This perspective transforms the Stoic idea that obstacles are the way into a practical approach to difficulty. Rather than asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin asking, "What is this developing in me?" This isn't spiritual bypassing or toxic positivity. It's a profound reframing that extracts value from every experience. Try this exercise right now. Think of your current biggest challenge, the thing that's been causing you the most stress or difficulty. Now, instead of wishing it away, ask yourself, If this challenge were intentionally designed to help me grow, what specific quality or skill might it be developing? Take 30 seconds to genuinely consider this question. Did you notice a shift in how you're relating to that challenge? Most people report an immediate sense of possibility and agency, replacing victimhood and resistance. That's amor fati beginning to work in your life. The Stoics also emphasized that true eudaimonia requires contribution beyond yourself. While modern self-help often focuses primarily on personal well-being, the Stoics insisted that human flourishing necessarily includes service to others. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What benefits the hive benefits the bee." This wasn't mere altruism, it was recognition of our inherent interconnection. Try implementing what I call the daily contribution practice. Each morning during your Stoic reflection, ask, how might I be useful today? Not just productive or successful, but genuinely useful to others. This doesn't require grand gestures. Perhaps it's giving your full attention in conversations, sharing knowledge generously, or simply performing your regular work with exceptional care. Thomas, a teacher who implemented this practice, shared, "I stopped seeing difficult students as obstacles to my lesson plan and started seeing them as the very reason for my work. My question shifted from, how can I get through to them, to how can I be most useful to them today?" Everything changed, though my external circumstances remained identical. This expansion of concern beyond yourself naturally leads to what the Stoics called expanding circles of connection. They visualized ethical development as moving from concern for self to family, to friends, to community, to all of humanity. This wasn't just philosophical theory. It was a daily practice of deliberately extending your circle of care. Try this exercise. During your next interaction with a stranger, perhaps a cashier or someone in an elevator, silently think to yourself, this person, like me, wishes to be happy and avoid suffering. Notice how this simple recognition changes the quality of even brief encounters. As you deepen your Stoic practice, you might want to create what I call your personal Stoic code, a written document that articulates your core principles and how you intend to express them in daily life. This isn't a rigid set of rules, but a living document that evolves as your understanding deepens. Your code might include statements like, I will recognize what is and isn't under my control before responding to challenges, or I will treat obstacles as opportunities for practicing virtue. The act of articulating these principles makes them more accessible during difficult moments. A powerful advanced Stoic technique is what I call the imaginary mentor practice. The Stoics would often imagine consulting with the great philosophers or historical figures they admired. Seneca regularly engaged in imaginary dialogues with Cato, asking himself what this exemplar of Stoic virtue would do in his circumstances. You can adapt this by identifying historical or contemporary figures who embody qualities you aspire to develop. When facing a difficult decision, take a moment to ask, what would Marcus Aurelius do in this situation? Or substitute anyone whose wisdom you respect. This isn't about worship, but about accessing perspectives beyond your habitual thinking. As your practice deepens, you'll likely want to integrate Stoicism with other approaches that support your development. Many practitioners find that mindfulness meditation enhances their ability to observe their impressions before assenting to them. Regular physical exercise provides practical experience with voluntary discomfort and discipline. Cognitive behavioral therapy offers complementary tools for examining and restructuring beliefs. The beauty of Stoicism is its compatibility with many other practices. It doesn't demand exclusivity, but rather provides a foundational philosophy that can incorporate diverse techniques. As Seneca advised, I'll show you my wound, but I'll take medicine from any doctor who can heal it. Let me share a comprehensive transformation story that illustrates these advanced principles in action. Michael came to Stoicism after years of debilitating anxiety that had narrowed his life to a small, safe territory of predictable routines. He began with basic practices: the dichotomy of control, negative visualization, and Stoic journaling. These techniques significantly reduced his anxiety, but after 6 months, he found himself asking, "What now? Is this all there is, just not feeling bad?" That question led him to the deeper aspects of Stoic practice we're discussing now. He began deliberately seeking challenges that would develop virtue, signing up for a public speaking course, courage, committing to regular volunteer work, justice, and practicing intermittent fasting, temperance. What had begun as anxiety management evolved into a comprehensive philosophy of life. "The difference is that I'm no longer just trying to avoid discomfort," he explained. "I'm actively pursuing growth and contribution. Anxiety still appears occasionally, but it's no longer the central character in my story. It's just one emotion among many that I observe with Stoic awareness." To support your continued practice, consider creating a practice community, even if it's just 1 or 2 people with whom you can discuss your Stoic journey. The Stoics themselves, contrary to popular misconception, weren't isolated individuals, but active teachers and community members who understood the power of shared commitment to philosophical principles. Online communities dedicated to practical Stoicism have grown exponentially in recent years. From discussion forums to practice groups that meet virtually, these communities provide accountability, inspiration, and the chance to learn from others' experiences. As Seneca wrote, "No one can live a happy life if he turns everything to his own purposes. Live for others if you want to live for yourself." For those wanting to deepen their understanding, I recommend starting with modern translations of primary Stoic texts: Marcus Aurelius, Meditations, Epictetus, Enchiridion, and Seneca's Letters. These are surprisingly accessible and often feel as if they were written yesterday rather than 2,000 years ago. Modern works like How to be a Stoic or A Guide to the Good Life provide excellent contemporary frameworks for these ancient teachings. To customize these practices for your next phase of growth, regularly reassess which Stoic techniques resonate most strongly with your current challenges. In different seasons of life, different aspects of the philosophy may become more relevant. The versatility of Stoicism is one of its greatest strengths. It offers specific tools for virtually any human difficulty. The role of service to others becomes increasingly central as your practice matures. The Stoics viewed proper human functioning as necessarily including contribution to the common good. Marcus Aurelius compared humans to bees. What is not good for the hive is not good for the bee. This wasn't just moral instruction, but a recognition of our social nature and the fulfillment that comes from expressing it. Look for small ways to incorporate service into your daily routine, perhaps by mentoring someone, sharing your knowledge freely, or simply bringing extra attention to how your work benefits others. These don't require additional time, but rather a shift in perspective about activities you're already doing. As we conclude our journey through Stoic practices, I invite you to consider this philosophy not as a set of techniques to learn, but as a path to walk. The Stoics didn't seek to accumulate knowledge, but to transform their character through consistent practice. As Epictetus bluntly put it, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." Imagine receiving a letter from yourself 1 year in the future, after 12 months of consistent Stoic practice. What would it say? How would your relationship with challenge and difficulty have changed? What new capacities would you have developed? Take a moment to genuinely envision this. Each day that passes without beginning this practice is a day of potential growth and tranquility lost. As Seneca reminds us, while we wait for life, life passes. The Stoics understood profoundly that our most limited resource isn't money, status, or connections, it's time. It is not that we have a short time to live, Seneca wrote, but that we waste much of it. Your challenges will continue to exist. The world will remain unpredictable, but you will have something that few possess, the capacity to face whatever comes with clarity, purpose, and serenity. Not because everything is perfect, but because you no longer demand perfection to find peace. This is the true Stoic transformation. Not an escape from reality, but a deeper engagement with it, armed with the mental tools to thrive where others merely survive. Are you ready to begin your 30 days?